Hello world, hello Facebook, hello all those watching this on listenvisionlive.com. It's the Nitty Gritty Show. It's your boy Jay DeCosta.
It's your girl Katniss.
And together we are the Nitty Gritty.
It's Tim Wise. You're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
Everybody, this is Stevie Powell. You're now watching the Nitty Gritty Show. Check it out.
And so I'm DeCosta and you need to watch the Nitty Gritty Show.
My name is Sherman Moss, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
That's the Grant Thompson, aka G. Ainsworth, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
I'm Anthony White, and this is the Nitty Gritty Show.
Yeah.
Bam, it's Jay Thompson. You're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
You are watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
My name is Jay Grant Thompson, and guess what? You're in tune to the Nitty Gritty Show.
I'm Will Jawando, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
And my name is Mitch Holmes, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
And my name is Peter DeCosta and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
This is Pastor Rob, and you're on the Nitty Gritty Show.
I'm Ray Pittman, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
Hey, this is Joni Ford of Ford Wilderness, and you're watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
Yo, what's going on? It's your boy Benny Black, and you are watching the Nitty Gritty Show.
It's time for the Nitty Gritty. Conversations get real live. It's time for the Nitty Gritty. The revolution's not televised. It's time for the Nitty Gritty. Reaching out to your conscious mind. It's time for the Nitty Gritty. More than talking and taking action. It's time.
Hey, what's going on world? What's going on Facebook? Everybody catching us live at listenvisionlive.com. It's your boy Jay DeCosta.
And it's your girl Katniss.
And together we are the Nitty Gritty. Really excited today. We have Marylin Pierre, who's running for judge right now in Montgomery County, on the show with us today. Actually had a chance to meet her at a volunteering event. So really excited about having a conversation with you and your run and your experience and what you're going to bring to the county, because I'm confident you're going to get it.
Well, thank you very much, Jay. I appreciate your confidence. I hope to prove you proud.
Yes, you will. And so just, I have a quick bio. I want to read some of this off of here. You've been practicing law now for 26 years, representing clients whose cases have actually established precedent for the state of Maryland. Yes. So I feel like that's really impressive. Also, everybody who watches this show knows I'm a military man. I'll bring it up plenty of times. So you're a military woman, was a first lieutenant in the United States Army, in the reserves, right?
Yes, military police officer.
Military police? Oh, so you don't play?
No.
So you can put the cuffs down on somebody. You let them know.
Yes, I can.
You could probably speak to a lot of these shootings and everything too, because you that means you actually know how, when you're talking about several levels of force.
Yes.
The fact that they're pulling these guns out so fast, we know, being trained, because I actually served with military police for a little while too. And so we know that there's no reason for them to be running to their guns when you have a whole belt full of things to bring somebody down.
That's true.
So maybe we'll get into that a little bit. Also, I know that you're the general counsel for Montgomery County Historical Society,
Yes.
Legal advisor for the Business and Professional Women of Maryland. And you have some pretty impressive accolades as well. I see that you were also recipient of the Daily Records Maryland's Top 100 Women in 2010, 2012, 2014.
That's correct.
So yeah, multiple awards.
Thank you very much. I try.
That's impressive. And also I saw that you've done some stuff. Recipient of the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee Morgan Journey Community Service Award.
Yes.
Makes sense because we met you doing some service. So I like that. And then also you received the Montgomery County Bar Foundation Pro Bono Award as well for pro bono services. So nice to know that you're giving back. And then also Maryland NAACP.
Yes.
Yeah, so highly decorated. Seems like you're definitely in the know. So I'm happy to have you here with us. And then also we got to bring this up because we're right across the street from it. Howard University law grad, right?
Exactly. Wonderful. Yeah. I'm a proud Bison.
That's what's up. Yeah. So happy to have you on the show today, and we'll get more into that. But before we go there and get down to the nitty gritty, everyone who watches this show knows we got to give out these to hell withs, and we have to give out some blessings. So first, to hell with the teacher who accidentally shot the students there in California while trying to show them something with a weapon. It discharged unbeknownst to him and injured 3 students, from what I understand. It didn't kill any of them, but injured them, and that's still too much. And this police officer, this teacher, what they don't realize is a reserve police officer. Mm-hmm. So he actually knows how to handle a weapon. He knows his way around a gun, and yet he still had an accidental discharge. Mm-hmm. So how do you think you're going to arm just the common teacher who doesn't use a weapon and then tell them to conceal carry in a school system doesn't make any sense. It just adds more reason why we don't need to arm teachers.
And I feel like with that individual, I don't understand why there were any bullets in the gun in the first place. If it was more so a demonstration, to me, there was no need to have bullets in the gun.
Shouldn't have been loaded. I mean, there's so many things that went wrong there that shouldn't have happened, especially in a school, situation. Like even when I did JROTC in high school, and we didn't even have real weapons. We had the rifles that were clogged, so you couldn't put a weapon, any kind of bullets in them anyways when you did drill and ceremony. But then also, if you weren't on the rifle team, we used airsoft rifles. So they were just the little BBs. So once again, no bullets. So it's just crazy that happened. So I got to give that to hell with. And then
also the safety always has to be on.
Yeah.
So for the safety not to be on and for there to be bullets in a classroom full of children.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's scary.
So that's the kind of things like that just this country is trying to move forward. Certain agendas are taking precedent, and we need to stop that. And then the other one I got to give it up to is OJ, his "if I did it" confession. I was
awful.
I was sickened by it because he's laughing, he's joking around, he's. It's just hard to do this, but, trying to paint myself like a murderer. But, if I did it, there would have been a lot of... And then this whole Charlie character that he made up, saying that, there was a Charlie with him. A lot of people think that was maybe another part of his psyche. But in either case, he did it. Even if you watch the old documentaries that came out, the DNA... Like, we know now because of television and what that means, what DNA means to us now, we would have said back then, like, well, if his DNA is all over the crime scene, then, of course, he did it. But, this is before CSI and all that. And then, at the time, we wanted to win so bad. But now we've had Halle Berry get an Oscar. Denzel Washington got an Oscar. We had President Obama. We've had Black Panther. We've had Get Out. We've had so much black success that we're not desperate for wins anymore. So if OJ was to do some crap like this today, I believe he would go to jail. Because I don't think we're desperate for black wins anymore. So to hell with the OJ. That was crazy. I wish they would just dead the whole situation and move on. That's just horrible. It was hard to watch. And then also got to give out blessings. Blessings to the UMBC, first 16 seed ever to be the first seed. So they made history. Me and Katniss don't necessarily agree about which one is the greater achievement. Was it the Cavs coming back from a 3-1 deficit, or is it the 16 seed?
Let me just explain this. Let me just explain this for like one minute. The reason why the Cavs win is bigger than this one is not simply because they came back from a 3-1 deficit, which had never been done in the NBA in the finals. It's the fact that the Cleveland franchise in general had gone without a win in 52 years. So it was very big because they were saying the curse in Cleveland, this city can never win. So the fact that LeBron left, okay, that was the big thing, came back, won a championship. They're down 3-1, never happened in the NBA Finals before, and the city had never won a championship in 52 years. There were just so many odds against it. We broke the curse. And that same year, the Indians were also in the finals. So it was just all around, it was a monumental, magical moment for the city of Cleveland.
But a little bit of like hometown bias too. Because people in Maryland would say, no,
I think we should, I think we should do that. We should move on, but we should take a poll and you guys leave it on our Facebook page. Let us know your thoughts. If you think UMBC's win is bigger than the Cleveland Cavaliers, we want to know. We're going to take a poll.
Yeah, we do want to know. We're going to put that poll out soon.
And then can't we just celebrate both? Because LeBron is a phenomenal player and he does so much for the community.
Yeah, see, smoking like a true judge, right?
Yeah,
like, wait.
We should celebrate both, but I want to prove to Juan that he is wrong. That the NBA Finals, the Cavaliers winning was bigger than UMBC. At the end of the day, people are still running around on Facebook playing that clip of when Kyrie shot it and then the block and then the shot. They're not going to do that with UMBC because it's college. It's not the same level as the NBA.
Got it. But it was big. And then also, so you were able to tell us before the show, another cool fact about UMBC, they actually graduate. So, this just wasn't a team that's like, basketball is all, they're not just jocks. The school itself actually graduates more black doctors and medical doctors than
doctors and PhDs than any other school in the country.
So that's pretty impressive. So, definitely a lot of love and celebration for UMBC for that, because that didn't just happen overnight in a game. That's been continued success going on for a long time. And in Baltimore is very much a black city in America. A lot of people don't know that.
Let's root for UMBC. Hopefully they go all the way.
Yeah, they got a game tonight. I guess it'll start towards the end of our show, but you guys can finish watching our show first and then tune in. But I think their game is at 7:45. So, yeah, let's go UMBC. But we're not going to delay anymore. We want to get down to the nitty gritty with Marylin Pierre. Really, like I said, really excited about having you on. You're our first judge for the show.
Yeah.
So we're excited about that. We've had a number of politicians on. Actually, we were supporting Will Jawanda when we met you at the Day of Service event in Silver Spring. So I'm really happy to have you on and have a woman of color on the show that's running for judge. I think that's impressive. I think that means a lot for us. So actually, before we get started, can you post a picture real quick? She sent us some pictures. We could go through a couple of these real quick, Jay. All right. Yep. So there we have Marylin Pierre running for judge, experience and fair. So make sure y'all vote for her. We have her information down there. We're going to display this again. So we're really excited about having Marylin on. Once again, a proud veteran, dedicated wife and mother, 24 years. People don't make it that long these days.
No, they don't.
That's wonderful.
And once again, you see the accomplishments down there below. So I from just doing the research and everything in preparation for the show, I feel like you're a solid vote.
Yep.
Well,
And I feel like we're going to get to know you some more, and our viewers are going to get to know more about you. And it's important that we participate in local elections. So I guess the first question I have automatically is, what got you into law in the first place? I mean, it seems like you've had a career in law. You decided to go into be a military police officer. Then, obviously, you went on to law school. You've been practicing lawyer for a while, and now you're running for judge. So, what got you into law? What was it? Did it happen at an early age? Was it later in life? What got you there?
I have wanted to be a lawyer ever since I was 12 years old.
Oh,
I
wow.
grew up in New York, and on July 2nd, 1978, there was this program celebrating Thurgood Marshall's 70th birthday. And I was amazed that one person was able to do so much and get us so far. I said, if he could do that by being a lawyer, I think I'm going to be a lawyer, because I could talk, I could read, and I could argue. So I became a lawyer, and I just love it. I came down here to Howard University School of Law because that's where Thurgood Marshall went to law school.
Oh, wow.
And I just never left.
Wow, that's that. So, Thurgood Marshall was a real inspiration to you through and through.
Yes, he was.
So you probably enjoyed the movie.
I love the movie. I
Wow.
love the play as well, the one at the Kennedy Center.
Awesome.
With Lawrence Fishburne.
Oh, okay. No, I haven't been.
And I think it's something to be said that Thurgood Marshall actually applied to go to University of Maryland, and they denied him.
No, he did not apply. That's a big misconception.
That's a big conception. Okay.
Yeah, he did not apply because he knew that he would not get in. So he traveled from Baltimore to D.C. to come to law school almost every day.
Now, I didn't know that he had a serious commute.
He did not University of Maryland.
He did. After he graduated from law school, he sued the University of Maryland, representing a man by the name of whose last name was Murray. So it's Murray versus the University of Maryland. My oldest son just graduated from the University of Maryland in December. And I kept pointing out to him when he got admitted that had it not been for Thurgood Marshall, you would not have been able to attend the University of Maryland.
Wow.
So
Okay.
It comes full circle.
Yeah.
You
wow.
see how she's fact checking everything, because that is the fact that was running around. They kept saying that he applied to University of Maryland and he couldn't get in. Well, we just heard it here, folks. That's not true.
That's not true.
That's awesome, though. But I mean, I think that's cool, because my daughter is 12, and Amira wants to be a lawyer, and she probably decided about around 9. She's been influenced by Michelle Obama, because Michelle Obama's a lawyer. Yes. She's been impressed with the Obama family. Her recollection goes back only to Obama really being in office, as far as what she can actually recognize. So I think that's cool that young ladies could be. And young men can be inspired by these folks that move the ball forward. And, it wasn't a basketball player. It wasn't like a singer or performer. But you were really impressed by Thurgood Marshall. And that gives me hope for my child. But then, for all the other children out there.
That's correct. It's so important to give children role models, because what they see is what they want to be. So if you give them proper role models, they will live up to that standard and achieve even more.
Wow.
I have one question. How many black women do you know are actually in this space that actually get to the level where they can actually run for judge? I'm just curious.
Not as many as there should be.
Okay.
Not as many as there should be, because not only do we need representation, but it's very important that we're out there because of what we talked about in terms of role models. We're not only role models for ourselves, but we're role models for other people as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, like, definitely, like, you know, you don't hear about a lot of women pursuing that. I know a few lawyers personally. Shout out to Karen out there in Tennessee. I know she's a judge now too, or she's working in that capacity. But yeah, we definitely need more. There's not enough out there. And when you think about, we're going to get to this later on in the show, but when you think about the cases coming before, if we don't have enough people that come from our background to understand or maybe be sensitive to how things can happen, you know, you had made a comment. And I guess I kind of like skip a little bit and I'll talk a little about this one. You had made a comment when we were getting ready for the show that, you know, you can make all the laws you want, but how you interpret the law is going to be a big deciding factor. Can you go into a little bit more detail about that?
Well, the same amendment that was used to rule in Plessy versus Ferguson when they talked about separate but equal was also the same amendment that was interpreted in Brown versus Board of Education with the desegregation case. So it depends on who's looking at the law and why they're looking at it. Some people might say that, oh, you know, history, it was different back then. But there are some people who still rule that Plessy versus Ferguson was not the correct ruling in that case. But the majority in that case decided that they were going to decide that separate but equal would be the law of the land rather than desegregating the system. I look at Plessy versus Ferguson as such an important case and putting us back, because if you look at the period after the Civil War, black people were making so much progress. We've had black United States senators, we had black higher officials, but after Plessy versus Ferguson, all of that went away. So you could see how it's so important to have people who have your best interest in mind to make decisions about you when it comes to the law.
Yeah, and because I forget, when was Plessy versus Ferguson? You remember the time frame? I always forget.
18. Oh God, I forgot, but it was in the late 1800s. After it was
just after like the
18
Civil War period.
Yeah, a couple of years after. I want to say less than 20 years after.
So it's amazing that as soon, because you know people always make there's a misconception that after the Civil War, you know, and after, you know, Emancipation Proclamation, that, you know, black folks didn't try to really move ahead. That there's like this period where we're just waiting for Master to give us more permissions. You hear a lot of your I call Timbuktu Twitter folks say that, but what they don't realize is that after Plessy versus Ferguson, that's what literally shut everything down, and we won't see any true movement in politics and in all that until the Thurgood Marshall era, where, you know, with the NAACP and all that movement, and then the civil rights movement. So you're talking about almost a 50-year gap that law put us back, and like you said, they both use the same law to be interpreted to make both pass. So one group looked at it and said, well, based off my interpretation, we can do this. And then it took, 60 years later for Thurgood Marshall with Brown versus Education to say, you know what? Well, through my lens, I see this. And then what a lot of people don't realize is in the 90s, that was overturned anyways. Or there was amendments made to it, right? The Brown versus Education?
Well, there have been a couple of Brown cases because the first Brown case didn't move as quickly to desegregate the schools as the Supreme Court that it should have. So there was a Brown 2. And today, schools are still segregated to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So we're still working on progress.
Yeah, so, you know, because I think a lot of times people think about the judges and the law and they think, oh, well, you know, the work has already been done back in the 60s. But, you know, I just wanted to show the importance of what's so important about you running in Montgomery County and why judges are still so relevant. I mean, I think a lot of times we just kind of overlook, you know, we vote for president. Maybe if you're lucky, you might get them to vote for governor. But then you forget, like, wow, like, you know, when you talk about, oh, my child support payments are too high or this happened. Well, you know, voting for your judge would set all that up.
Yes, that's true.
So, you know, I don't think people realize that. And then talking about that power, can you explain to our viewers what that position of judge, what that really entails, and the power that you actually have over the law in Montgomery County.
Well, they say that all politics is local, and a judge is as local as you could get, because you're looking at the person who's going to decide if you go to jail, how long you're going to go to jail, if you get your child back, what visitations you're going to get with your child, if your child support payments are too high, if you're not getting enough child support payments, if you're going to lose this case and you're going to have to pay someone, or if you're going to win this case and someone's going to have to pay you. That's as local as you could get.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of times all those things you talked about, we have these conversations at the executive level or the executive branch, but they have nothing to do with it.
No, they don't.
And I think a lot of people just don't realize how powerful a judge is. Or I've heard people that complain, they'll go to court, be like, yeah, that judge was racist, or that judge is this. But that's why you need to vote for Marylin Pierre.
That's why you need to vote for me.
I guess what I would like to ask is, how do we kind of close the gap from the knowledge that judges have and prosecutors have and defense lawyers have to people who are common community folks? Because what happens, or at least what I hear, is that these young men get in trouble, they'll stand before a judge and they'll literally give them a plea deal, and they're like, well, I guess I'll take it, because if I don't win the case, I'm gonna do 30 years in prison. But had they took the case, it's a possibility they could have got off or gotten less time. How can we educate our people on the system and how it works?
Well, it's very important that people become educated, because it is their life that they're playing with, basically. And it's hard to put your life in someone's hand. I always tell my clients that you don't want to be here because if you had to decide whether you want to be in court or not, you definitely would not decide to be in court, because something has gone wrong somewhere along the way, and that's why you're in court. So by the time you get to court, the best that you could do is make the best out of a bad situation, basically. And when you're in court, even if you're not guilty, you have to go to allow the prosecutor to prove his or her case, and then you have to respond in terms of proving that you're not guilty. So it's still a process. It's still difficult for you to do that. But on the other hand, what you could try to do is you could try to get in a position where you don't get there. Like, for instance, if you are called by the police to come in to answer some questions, bring a lawyer with you. Because many times what happens is that it's just you with someone who's trained in the law. And it makes for a very imbalanced situation. So if you could bring a lawyer with you, that would be quite helpful. I know it's hard. I know it's expensive sometimes, but it might be worth it, just so you could avoid what could happen next.
Now, are there lawyers out there that will do, I mean, I know you've done pro bono service. Are there lawyers out there that would come to the aid of someone and say, hey, look, I'm about to be questioned by the police for whatever reason? Is there like places you can call to get that kind of support?
Not likely, because if you have somebody out there that you know who could do it, and it should cost only a couple of $100s. So it might be an investment that you might be willing to make just to do that, because the other possibility is just difficult to think of. It's one of those things where you might be penny wise or pound foolish. So better to be, better to make the investment now, hopefully. And there's some people who might be able to do it. There's not an organization, as you might say, to do it.
Got it.
Yeah. And I could tell you the times that people have hired me to do that, the police have never charged them, because by the time you talk to the police about what happens and why it is that your client is not the person, they understand that they will not be able to get the prosecutor to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But see, a lot of people don't even know that, because a lot of people don't know to spend the money up front early, because we know that a lot of people are wrongfully convicted. And this, and this is definitely for those out there who are being wrongfully convicted, or, because, these days, you hear about these prosecutors, they try to throw as many laws at, the person as possible, because they know the more they can stack on there with the plea deal, you take the lowest offense, but you're still looking at, 2 years probation. And if you're on probation, it's almost impossible to get a job at times in some places. Or, when you're talking about finding a place to live, all these harsh realities that come into play. And if people just know up front to say, hey, you know what? I know that I may be deciding between, you know, how I pay my cell phone bill or doing this, but it's worth paying that $500 up front that keeps you from even going to court. That's not even something that people realize.
Yeah,
you know?
they should.
Wow.
Yeah. If anybody ever calls you and says, hey, I want to talk to you about something, anything, I always tell people that on TV, you always see rich people, the first thing they do is call their lawyer. They call their lawyer.
That's true.
That is true.
Yeah.
The first thing they do. And there's a reason why. Because when you call your lawyer and you have that buffer, it makes it a whole lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know in some of the programs they show that people are talking and the lawyers say, no, don't confess, and they're confessing. But that's just, you know,
that's for TV.
That's just drama.
Got it.
But in real life, if you have
People.
your lawyer's job is to protect you.
And most people are going to listen to their lawyer.
Exactly.
I have a question for you. It seems like back in the 60s when we were denied rights, it seems like people were studying a lot to learn different laws because they wanted to vote and they wanted to be involved. And now it seems like we don't really know the laws that well, and we struggle to get people to see us for who we truly are. It's almost like as people of color, we are guilty until proven innocent as opposed to being innocent until proven guilty. I don't know if you heard about the show 7 Seconds that's been floating around Netflix, but there was a young boy on there and they were trying to basically say that he was the thug, and they went through this whole conversation to prove that actually no, he was just a regular black kid in the park, and the police were trying to cover up this murder that they were a part of. The point I'm trying to make is, what can we do as a people to, I guess, get that zealousness back to want to know the laws, so that way when we are in these predicaments, we have a better opportunity, and how we can kind of debunk some of the misconceptions about us. You know, if I wear a hoodie, does that make me guilty? Not necessarily. And I don't know how we got these perceptions. Well, I know how we got them, but what can we do to, I guess, get fair treatment when it comes to the law and conviction and what so have you?
I think it's education. And the reason why education is so important is because if you could get a child to become engaged in his or her community, that child will go so far. What happens is I don't think we're able to relate to children how what they do today will affect them tomorrow. And I do a lot of that in my practice. I represent a lot of children. And when I talk to them, I say to them, I will treat you like my biological children because I have an investment in you. I kid with them and I say, look, if I could get you to be gainfully employed when you get older, that means that you'll be paying taxes and you'll be paying for my nursing home, and I want a nice nursing home. So that's my incentive for getting you there. And I do that in jest, but I think they need to know that they're doing it for somebody else sometimes because they don't think that they have the capability in themselves yet. But when I speak to my clients who are also children, I explain the process to them. Many of them don't know the process of how to get from here to there, how to apply for college, how to even go to speak to a counselor to get your questions answered. And it's just a matter of educating them and letting them know. And also the parents. Sometimes the parents themselves had difficulties along the way, and school is not it is not as friendly to them as you would hope that it would be. It's just a matter of educating people, getting them comfortable in there. It's hard sometimes to walk into a room when you don't see yourself in there. And sometimes you just have to give the person the power to do that. I think that's one of the reasons why I love Howard so much, because Howard has taught us that no matter who's in the room, you're worthy. You've been trained to be in there, and you could stand up to just anybody because you have been educated in a way where you're forced to be reckoned with.
I like that.
Me too.
Now, and then, so, and that's one part of like educating, but then, and we talk about the importance of having like people of color sitting in the judge seat, but then how important is it for people to actually show up for jury duty? Because you always hear, it's like a running joke now, like, oh, jury duty, oh, I didn't even get it, oh man, I won't do it. But then you start thinking about these cases and how they deliberate. I had a friend of mine that sat on jury duty out in Baltimore, and she was just telling me about like the case and how messed up it was. You know, this was after the fact. She can't talk about it during, but this was after the fact. She was telling me about the case, and then it just opened your eyes up to, you know, like, wow, like, you know, I can't believe, and when they're looking at, you know, ways to defend the guy, and then things look so unorganized, and then, you know, when you're looking in on it, well, it's obvious, you know, XYZ happened, or we should make XYZ decision. So, you know, how important is it, like, just serving in jury duty, you know, to be judged among your peers?
Well, I've always wanted to be on a jury, but every time I show up, no one would choose me because I'm a lawyer, so that makes it difficult. They wouldn't even choose my husband because he's married to a lawyer.
Wow.
But it's quite interesting when you talk to people afterwards, the perception that they get of the judicial system. And I think we have a great judicial system. I've looked at other types of judicial systems, and I think we have the best when it is performing at its optimal level. Of course, it doesn't perform at its optimal level all the time. So.
And you know, and while we're talking about that, actually, I want to play a quick video. Jay, can you play that video for me? It actually talks about some of the statistics around the prison system, and then from there, I think we could get a little bit more in depth with that.
One in 3 black men will spend time in prison at some point in their lives. 1 in every 13 black men ages 30 to 34 was in prison in 2011 versus 1 in 90 white men in the same age group. Why? For one, black people are 3 times as likely to be searched than whites during traffic stops and twice as likely to be arrested. And this starts young. Of the population under 18, African Americans make up 17% of the total, 30% of those arrested, and 62% of those tried in adult criminal courts. Being tried as adults leads to longer and more severe sentences. Another reason for the racial disparity of our criminal justice system, the war on drugs. Despite studies that show black and white people use and deal drugs at equal levels, black people make up 37% of the people arrested for drug offenses. Once they get out of prison, black people are 3 times more likely to be disenfranchised than white people. White men with recent criminal records are far more likely to receive callbacks for job interviews than black men with no criminal record at all. In this way, we already treat black people like felons. On top of that, black people are twice as likely as white people to be unemployed. This was true in 1954, and it's true now. This has led to one of America's most shameful facts. The median wealth of white families is 13 times more than black families. A contributing factor is that white people are almost twice as likely to own a home, one of the country's best paths to building wealth. The gap in home ownership between black and white people is the same now as it was in 1900. For those who are homeowners, black families live in neighborhoods where the median income is $10,000 lower than a similar income white family's neighborhood, which means local schools and public services are worse. This is a modern continuation of ghettoization, which started in the mid-20th century. Suburbanization and white flight began, in part, as a response to the disappearance of Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws were a way to prevent black people from fully joining society after the abolition of slavery. Nowadays, we just toss 1 of every 3 black men in jail.
And that was a cool video about Fusion, and I like the fact that they actually named their sources, so that was good. And so we were kind of like even talking like during that video, and you know we talked about like, you know, just, you know, kind of going back to that interpretation of the law, and then like bias that people have, right? You know, Kat, I think you said, you know, who's making these decisions, right? And then so you had a response for her, and I want you to repeat that again because. And I think you talked about that briefly with me over the phone when we were prepping for the show, but I think our listeners need to hear that.
There's a podcast, called Hidden Brain, and it's fabulous because it talks about psychology and what people are thinking. They recently did a rebroadcast of a show they did a couple months ago where they talk about how racism is bad for everyone in society. So racism is not only bad for people of color, it's also bad for everyone in society, basically. And in that podcast, they talked about implicit bias. and how, because we live in the society that we live in, we get these messages that associate black with bad and white with good. And how, because of that, it's difficult to associate white with bad and black with good. And our brains really have to do extra work in order to do that. And it's not necessarily black is bad, white is good, white is bad, black is good. It's just, that's the way we've been thought of. And so because of that, that's why sometimes you'll see black police officers who are just as likely to shoot a black person than a white police officer is. So it's not about the color of the police officer, it's what the society is basically putting into their brains.
Wow. And because we don't think about that, and I mean, we see it with young kids, but we forget about what that looks like after maturation, right? So we know with the doll test, right? We've seen, they ask a black kid, "What's beautiful?" or "What's the ugly doll?" and they'll say the black doll is the ugly doll. But then we don't think about, well, what does that look like when that black kid grows up to be 35 years old, has a badge and a gun? You automatically assume that other black men are guilty. Right, because you already have this, you've been this preconditioning to say this, and I think the fact that you're aware of that, I think that helps a catalyst for change when you sit in the seat, because it'd be refreshing to know that you'll have someone looking at cases that will just actually listen to the facts of the case truly, versus us making an assumption. Well, this must have happened.
Exactly.
Because I even looked at the Maryland stats of arrest and all of that, and even like you look at like domestic violence, you look at murder cases, burglaries, everything. Believe it or not, black and white men are arrested around the same rate. But we know that from a conviction standpoint, that number is different. Now, when I say arrested around the same rate by number, but we know that we're a minority in Maryland, whites still outnumber us. So the fact that they'll have like 12,000 arrests of white men in association with domestic violence cases, and only 10,000 black men arrested in association to domestic violence cases. We know that white men greatly, just by number, outnumber black men. So when you start looking at percentages, and then we start looking at, convictions, like, where are these white men that's being convicted of that? Because there's definitely a stigma towards black men that they're so-called ultra-violent and hyper-aggressive, but then we don't associate that with white men at all. And I think that plays big in the courtroom. And then just like, I think with your experience, what do you think makes you unique in the sense that from your experiences, whether it's, your military background, being raised in New York, all of that, what do you feel like will make you different sitting in the judge seat? Maybe not necessarily from who's already there, but maybe from what we typically see, or what I guess the stereotype is.
Well, I come from the community. I know a lot of people in the community. I do a lot in the community, and I run into a lot of people. I have friends from all walks of life. And I think that would make me unique, because I don't just say, oh, okay, I'm a lawyer, so therefore I'm not going to hang around this neighborhood or that neighborhood. I think it's very important to know the community that you are going to be looking at people who come in front of you. And it's also important to educate yourself, and I try to educate myself as much as possible, because not only is there the issue of the color line, there's also the issue of the sexual line. Because what I've noticed is that when one woman comes out and says, hey, so-and-so did this to me, she almost always has to be followed by somebody else in order for her to be believed. And it's really kind of sad that you just can't take the word of a woman to say, hey, this has happened to me. There's always has to be a me too. Oh yes, he did this to me too. So therefore, that's when people start looking at him going, maybe he did really do this.
And then then it's still only maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's really, really important.
I wanted to ask you about facts like that. When you see cases, how many of your colleagues do you think actually view things from the lens of facts versus bias? Because in that situation, it's always, like you said, another woman has to say me too, but we know that when you talk about child support, there have been men who will go and show facts of what they did on paper with their kid, and there are judges who were like, no, full custody to the mom. So I feel like there are gender biases in different scenarios. How many of your colleagues do you think actually look at these situations with a lens of unbiased point of views, or do you think that bias does play a role when they make a verdict?
I find that interesting because I've been, and it's a really interesting question because I've been looking at it and I've seen it both ways to the detriment of the parties. I've seen it where some judges are just like, well, I'm not going to believe the woman no matter what she says. I don't care how many witnesses she has. I'm just not going to believe her. And we've had cases like that where that has happened. There have been a couple of people who have killed their children after they've been to court in Montgomery County, and the judges were told, don't give this person unsupervised visit because he would harm their child, but he didn't believe the woman and all her witnesses. And then I've also seen it the other way around, where the woman is asking for child support and the man is like, oh, I'm about to lose my job. And we're like, well, but this is the fourth time that that we've been in court and you said the same thing and you still have your job. Well, and the judge says, well, he says he's about to lose his job, so he's about to lose his job, so I'm not going to order child support. So I've seen it. So each judge seemed to have his or her preferences. I don't want to say prejudices, preferences. And sometimes it matters that, you have somebody who's going to look at it. Nobody has a crystal ball. I don't think anybody wants anybody to become hurt.
Right.
But sometimes it just seems like the decision that is made is something that's made in advance, and then certain things are looked at to try to support that decision, as opposed to looking at the facts and then making a decision based on the facts.
Wow. You don't really think about that a decision is already made. They're just looking for facts from and with bias to support a decision that they've already in their mind decided to make. And even like when we watch television, when we evaluate this people, we all kind of do that to a certain extent, and then somehow we expect these judges just to somehow dissociate their lifestyle outside of the seat and then get there and just be like this pure and perfect person that can make a judgment. And that's not true. And I think that's why I just think that's why voting for a judge is so important, because you want to look at the character of a person. Well, what are they doing? And something key that you said earlier was just actually getting into the community that you're serving. You meet like some of these officials. I mean, you meet candidates for various positions, and so a lot of them are not doing anything within their community. They're not touched in the community. They're not really like involved in the community the way they should be. Now, we've had the pleasure now that you're one of quite a few politicians we've had on the show, or at least within that realm, and you're actively engaged in the community. So I think the Nitty Gritty, we just have a great way of pulling those kind of individuals.
Yeah, you guys do a great job.
But so many individuals aren't living that lifestyle, representing that, and I think that's going to be key in representing us. I know you handle a lot of like divorce and family court. What are some of your thoughts that you see on that? Like when those judgments are made, I mean, is there any way to help minimize the blow of what that is?
I want to go back a little bit about what you said about the community, because if the only time you see a certain group of people is when they're in your courtroom being accused of something, then that's the only thing that you have to pull from. And it makes it very difficult to then say, oh, okay, well, I could do a good job with that. But if you see people out there in the community just being themselves and being in their own skin, then it's just easier to say, okay, I've seen this. I understand that just because, he has his pants pulled all the way down doesn't mean that he's not an A student. Just because he wears a hoodie doesn't mean that he's not out there, trying to hide his books from his friends and reading when he needs to at night to make sure that his homework is done.
Yeah, and I think that's important because like each culture has their own style, their own flavor, and so just to make a judgment based off, because and I'm happy you said that, because there's this idea that you have to dress a certain way when you go to court, and I think you should want to look presentable, but then how you're dressed or how your hair is styled really shouldn't make any difference whether you're guilty or not.
That's true.
You should really be able to go to court in a hoodie and be judged fine. But people are paying too much attention to how you look or the color of your skin.
That's true.
And do you think that's like a hard thing? Do you feel like that would be a hard thing for you to look past it? Like, if a young man has locks and his pants down and a hoodie, is that going to be hard for you to overlook? Or would you just be able to still be able to focus on facts and say, you know what? No, this doesn't make sense. How can he be guilty?
Well, I had a father. He passed away 2 years ago. I miss him greatly. Thank you very much. I have brothers, cousins, sons, nephews, and we have the whole spectrum in our family. So having people around who look a certain way doesn't necessarily mean to us that this person did this or did not do this. So.
And I think that goes to the importance of having diversity in the courtroom, definitely, because you're not going to look at someone and say they're inherently evil. Kat?
I was going to say, since you deal with divorces, have you ever had a situation where you listen to the story and you realize they had more so conflict of communication, and you try to maybe advise that they reconcile? Or do you feel like from a lawyer perspective, it's like, I got to get this money, so I'm going to advise you to take everything he got, girl, or vice versa? Just curious to know.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I've sent many people back saying, I've been married for a while. I think you should try to work this out, because divorce is not fun.
Okay.
I mean, it is not fun at all. It's
Lord knows.
It's not. And sometimes I would say to people, maybe you could work this out. I've had people come into my office with beautiful wedding albums. Oh my gosh, these were my colors, these were my flowers, this was my wedding gown. It took me so long to do this, and this is what the best man wore. And oh yes, we're filing for divorce because we're arguing over how much the wedding cost. Like, you've only been married for 2 months. I think you should take some time. I think you should take some time to think about it. I had a client who came into my office 3 times asking for a divorce, and like, well, if that's all you have, maybe just separate. I've told many people to go to their advisor, go to a church, or go to a counselor or something like that, and try to work it out. Because, like I said, divorce is not fun, and it's really, really, really difficult when children are involved on top of that. I'm not saying stay married if you're miserable. I'm not saying stay married if you're in an abusive relationship. I'm just saying sometimes there's no better out there. And, in a marriage, there are valleys and there are peaks, and maybe you're in the valley, and that doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be a peak one day. So try to write it out. If, like I said, no abuse, in the relationship.
Because I feel like I've been divorced, so and I do know that when you're going through that system, it seems like everybody is rooting for divorce. Like you got the families and friends are saying this, and the court system is saying everything they do, I think, helps contribute to separation and divorce. And you wonder how much of their personal lives are maybe like that. So maybe they're reflecting their own personal feelings onto the case. I think you're making me realize more so, like, how people's personal thoughts are still affecting what's supposed to be their professional opinion. And at least it's nice to know that in your case, you have a positive reflection onto what you bring into the courtrooms, because you are, married and been married for 24 years.
Happily married on my part anyway.
Yeah.
He's going to have to talk for himself.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's going to reflect and say the same.
Nice.
Yeah, so
I have one quick question. Sorry, and it's very quick. You don't have to go into detail, but as far as the entire legal system, how much of it is dictated by money? And the reason why I ask that is because when we think about these shows or different things we've heard about, we always associate politicians or people or lawyers with being shady, because they're always very money motivated. Oh, the judge knew that person, so they gave him some money under the table to rule this sentence. Are those things true?
Well, there are some people in every profession who are motivated by money.
Okay.
And in law, there's a lot of money, so I would think that the temptation would be more.
High.
As a lawyer, you have many times control over other people's money, and so sometimes things happen.
Wow.
It's really, really sad, but things happen. I've always been told that I'm not like other lawyers. I always thought that at first, well, when I first started practicing, because I looked so young, people thought that I was in high school.
Black don't
And
crack.
so, well, yeah. And so when they told me that, I thought that it was an insult, and it took me a while to realize what they were actually saying, which is you don't have that motivation that some people seem to have with that, because money doesn't motivate me. Well, it pays the bills, but so long as my bills are paid, I think I'm okay. But I think that my job as a lawyer, to go back a little bit, is to protect my client. And sometimes I've had to protect my client from themselves. Wow. In the divorce cases, you have people come in and say, well, so-and-so just cheated on me. So-and-so just, gave me some sexually transmitted disease. And I want to put it in the paperwork so that the whole world will know. And I said, well, if you insist on doing that, I am not the lawyer for you, because you're upset now, and I understand that you're upset. But 2 years from now, when you stop being upset and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm going to be dating, and the people I'm dating could go back into that public record and see that I had something for my spouse, for my ex-spouse, that's an issue. And then I said, even if you don't plan on dating, think about your children. Because 20 years from now, your children might be up for something in Congress or something like that, because we live right here in the area of the world's capital, basically. And so they're coming up for some Secretary of State, this and that, or something like that. And some journalist is looking into their parents going, ooh, look at that. Isn't that interesting? And, that makes father. And people, sometimes they don't think about that because they're in the heat of the moment. They just want to fight. They just want to hurt the other person. And sometimes they end up hurting themselves more.
Yeah.
Well,
was good.
Yeah. And we're running close to time, but before we end, I want you just to tell our viewers, what is it? Is that what's your goal for, or what's the contribution you hope to make and the change you hope to see as you take the judge seat in Montgomery County, Maryland?
In my race in Montgomery County, I am running against 7 other people for 7 positions. So there are actually 8 people running for 7 positions. Okay. All I need is to be top 7, and I get to move on to the next part of this ordeal. I think what I bring is a fresh perspective. I really think it's important that certain people are represented on the bench, and they're not. There's this culture of, if you have means, if the judge knows your lawyer, if the judge knows you, there's a certain way that you treat it. If the judge doesn't recognize you or doesn't see themselves in you, then you get treated another way. I really think that needs to stop. I really think that people should be treated the way everybody else is treated. Treat people with respect, treat people with dignity. I think the reason why that's so important is because when the system loses its credibility, it's not as good as it could be. As I said before, I think that this is the best system that we have, and when it is performing at its optimal level, there's nothing else better. But when you have a judge who treats somebody the way that they should not treat that person, that system is not acting at its optimal level, and it makes it really difficult for people to buy into the system.
Wow. Well, I appreciate that, and that's really important. I think you definitely added a lot of value to this show. I think that our viewers are going to get a lot from this. I want to remind people one more time who you are and where they can find you. Jay, can you post that picture one more time for me? So, yeah, definitely vote for Marylin Pierre for judge. Remember, she's running for judge out here in Montgomery County Circuit Court judge in Montgomery County. So definitely local elections are important. I was just say, primaries are coming up. When are the primaries?
June 14th to the 21st is early voting, and June 26th is the primary.
Okay.
So people know where you need to be June 26th or early voting. We get out for homecomings. We get out for movies. We get out for parties. You need to get out for judges, because when you're hopefully you're not in front of a judge like you stated earlier, but if you are in front of one, this is the one you want to be in front of. So it's the Nitty Gritty, and can you tell people where they find the Nitty Gritty at?
Yes, you can follow us on Instagram and on Facebook at The Nitty Gritty Show, and on Twitter at The Nitty Show.
Yeah, or they type in Nitty Gritty Show.
Yep.
They'll find it.
Oh, also on YouTube, we need you guys to subscribe. We are very close to getting our subscription following base up. So if you are watching, please go to YouTube and subscribe to The Nitty Gritty Show, because every Sunday when we post it, you'll be privy to every new show.
Yep. So like it's another great show. Excited about having you on today. It was amazing. Really looking forward to see where you go with this race. I think you're going to get there. I'm going to be voting for you.
Well, thank you very much.
You got my
Because I live in Montgomery County, so you got my
I live in
vote.
Montgomery County too. So
thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
So yeah, really appreciate you for being on. It's your boy J.D. Costa.
It's your girl Katniss.
Together we are
The
Nitty
Nitty
Gritty. Look, guys, it's been a great show. Make sure you follow us, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we out.